The 4th of June at Eton. On this great day, the college presents itself to its own world as its own world likes best to think of it, as the preserve of the English ruling class and the source of most of their virtues. Its world is reminded that on these playing fields, the Battle of Waterloo was won by an unflappable upper crust, which has never ceased since then to maintain a rich supply of top people from the same mould. The bishops, the ambassadors, the generals, the Tory cabinets, the landed gentry, and other blessings. This is what used to be called the top drawer. To most of these people, it would be unthinkable to send their son anywhere else. To the rest, his presence here is the culmination of a life's ambition. Even as a policy, it pays off. Eton is reputed to have the most influential old boy network in existence. There's not much that can't be fixed between a selected half-dozen old Etonians. The ceremonies of the 4th of June are tribal and not directed outwards. They serve to intensify a group feeling. It's a sentimental, nostalgic occasion whose message seems to be not only that what was always done at Eton still is done and always will be, but a hint that the confident world in which these river rituals once had a significance for the whole British tribe may not have gone forever. On the riverbank on the 4th of June, it might still be 1913, when the antics of the ruling class were a source of pride to the people, and Englishmen were, by and large, one nation, with shared prejudices and a common belief in the rightness of the social setup. It might be 1913, but it isn't. And this time, the serene rites were rudely interrupted by a plague of marchers. Young people who hold as an article of faith what in others is merely a growing suspicion, namely that if the top drawer were prized open, a strong smell of privilege and mothballs would emerge, and little else relevant to the state of the nation. How much of this is jealousy and prejudice? What in fact goes on at Eton in the course of a day? Eton College began its long life as the noblest grammar school in the kingdom, with free lodging and tuition for 70 scholars. More than 500 years after the founder, King Henry VI, laid down its statutes, there are still 70 King's Scholars at Eton. At 7:15 any morning in the summer term, or half as they call it, the day has begun where it began for the original 70.
Yes?
Is it piece 1881 we got to do as the construed?
Yes, that's right.
Well, in piece 80, how do you translate Paris dissatisfied in part?
Second singular, aorist indicative passive, Paris Grazzo.
Debbie, stupid, it's not passive. Middle, that's it. Middle, and what's it mean then?
But I don't see
These are junior boys and wear the ends of their white ties tucked into the collar. And if they're less than 5'1", it's a broad, turned-down Eton collar. There are 15 of them, the only boys at Eton without rooms of their own. They live in Chamber, all that's left of an enormous room where for centuries all 70 collegers lived and were locked up for the night to their own devices. These included bullying as a fine art, and up to about 100 years ago, catching rats to eke out the sparse and dreadful college food.
Yeah, and it all. Hargreaves are very enterprising.
Collegers, who are called tugs, wear gowns. The others, called oppidums, don't. The collegers are king's scholars and, by definition, intelligent boys. The others may or may not be. The old quarrel between the two on this score is now only a ghost in the feverish minds of very small boys. King Henry's plan for Eton allowed any number of boys from outside to share in the teaching at the college if they arranged their own board and lodging. The teaching became famous, the boys came flocking in, and lodging houses to cater for them sprang up all around the college. They're still there. They are Eton's houses. And though the men in charge of them nowadays are schoolmasters, not lodging house keepers, they have retained a good deal of their ancient independence. There are 25 houses at Eton of various sizes, and more than 1,100 boys live in them, the Oppidans. They outnumber the collegers by 15 to 1. Most of Eton's peculiar flavour is due to the early Oppidans. It must have been difficult to treat them as children. They paid out their lodging housekeepers with their own money. They brought tutors with them to help with the work. They had to think on their feet and order their own lives. To this day, the Eton manner is a mixture of independence and competence. Even a quarter of an hour before early school, there's little sign of life. But however independent they may be at Eton, they have to be in their places by 7:25 for 45 minutes work before breakfast. "7:25, just made it."
Will you take over from there?
Meanwhile, the rural ditties were not mute, tempered to the oaten flute, rough satyrs danced, and fawns with cloven heel from the glad sound would not be absent long, and old Demetus loved to hear our song.
Thank you. We want a little
In all
more
its
modulation.
essentials, this class has been going on in lower school for 520 years.
It gives a rather jerky effect, sort of staccato. Just smooth it out. Cooper?
For we were nursed upon the self-same hill, fed the same flock by fountain, shade, and rill. Together both ere the high lawns appeared, under the opening eyelids of the morn. We drove afield, and both together heard what time the grey fly winds her sultry horn.
Breakfast is at 8:10, a do-it-yourself meal which you don't take long about, and until 9 o'clock your time's your own. Except in some of the new houses, Eton interiors are apt to be pretty stark. One of the things you can do after breakfast is read all the newspapers in a sort of cellar. At Eton, you're expected to take an interest in what's going on in the world. They hope you may make some mark in it, and there's a strong anti-parochial attitude. The inside world is catered for by Eton's own newspaper, the Eton College Chronicle, published once a week.
See very little correspondence this week. I know. Do you know, all over the editor's book, they've got old editors saying, so, you know, tip number 7 usually, write letters yourself under pseudonyms. I think maybe we ought to try.
The joint editors, a colleger and an Oppidan, take very much their own line and criticize in their leaders even the most sacred of Eton's institutions. They hold opinion polls on such matters as the abolition of fagging, or corporal punishment, or the school dress.
I suppose. It's a big myth, isn't it, that, about being in mourning for George III, you know, thing one's always told. I thought that was the reason it was introduced. I don't think so. I think it was just a fashion, wasn't it, in the last century or a little before.
At 10:10, chapel. Compulsory chapel. Anglican, of course, and officially regarded at Eton, as at practically all the public schools, as the central fact in the school's life. But it's not too central to be examined by the Chronicle. Nostalgic remembrances of college chapel on a warm summer's evening, the Chronicle says, are neither here nor there. They may be valid emotional experiences, but they do not necessarily have anything to do with religion. What they are in fact commending is school spirit.
Let us pray. O Lord God Almighty, leave us not, we beseech thee, destitute of thy manifold gifts, nor yet of grace to use them always to thy honor and glory, through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Methods of Christian propaganda ought to be brought up to date, the Chronicle says. And it goes on, compulsory chapel has no value unless it is an instrument for this purpose. If it is anything less than this, it becomes a hollow, pseudo-religious ritual, no different from those which Christ incessantly condemned in the established religion of his day. In fact, under the new headmaster, the old rigor about chapel attendance has been considerably softened. Eton's curriculum is in process of revision since the universities now require A-levels and won't accept the college's own examination. But the methods are still very largely traditional. There's a good deal of learning by rote, with groups of little boys hearing each other their construe.
Number one was right.
How would you say by day?
Dear.
Cromwell faced three problems. The first was the problem of Ireland.
Eton seems to be a sort of cross between a medieval university, where they accepted boys at 12 years old, and a comprehensive school. Comprehensive because Eton accepts all streams except the very lowest. It has never required a highly intellectual standard of entry. Its aim is to educate the whole man. To this end, it deploys a staff of the highest quality, a tutorial system which ensures that it can never be out of touch with the progress of any boy, and a unique tradition of personal freedom.
A joule is taken to be 10 to the power of 7 ergs, because a joule is the work done by a force of 1 Newton when it moves through 1 meter. So a joule...
You can work very hard, or theoretically, you needn't. The system goes to great lengths to leave the choice to you. In the past, the college has succeeded best with boys of high academic ability, or those with practically none who chose an athlete's life. Few can afford that anymore, and the average boy has to earn a living.
In joules.
In many a battle, you've left out multis, proileis. You put just proileo by the one.
Besides all the normal lectures and classes, every boy comes under the tutorial system. Junior boys meet their tutor in groups for what's called pupil room. And here he takes them for work of all kinds which they have been set by him or other masters. This is by no means the same as the mere supervision of prep, but active teaching. Prep at Eton is a boy's own affair and done in his own time.
Jupiter with 1 P, please, in English. The Tyrian girl like a bull. In the guise of a bull would be a better translation for ut, as, literally as a bull, in the guise of a bull, right? She clung on to it, didn't she? Clung on to one thing and clung on to another, with her right, with her left, to cling on to, right? And she feared the touch, tactus. You know tango, tangere, tetigi, tactum? The noun. Plural there, if you scan it, you'll find it is tactus. Lowered his back beneath the waters. In order that you left out this word, very important. More strongly, literally.
Really, you're rather wasting my time. The point of this is that you should write a good essay with some sensible material. Bring it back at 7:15 this evening, all right? With the gaps already corrected, if you can in green, so that we can see them. And then we can construct between ourselves a rather better essay as such. It's very vexing. I'm not really free that, but however, all right? Do better next time.
For senior boys, the tutorial is an individual session. The system originated in the old days of the lodging houses when the oppidans brought their tutors with them. The old universities have the same system. Etonians have, in fact, been living undergraduates' lives for years before they reach the university.
This French essay of yours, quite a good introduction. Then we had tea or something. Quite a perceptive conclusion. Nothing to do with the introduction, of course, and the odd random point in between. Even different ink one sees. Forget this essay. The subject rather matters. What is a cultivated man?
Starting at the beginning, I suppose. A man who is looking for something deeper in life than the business of eating and sleeping and working.
Yes, one bound to accept that, of course. But take a range of figures. Montaigne, Goethe, whoever they may be. Haven't they got something in common which could lead you towards an appreciation of what the ideal cultivated man might be.
Are you talking about these authors or the characters that they write about?
Longfellow, well, both. Fair question. But of course both, because after all, they end their personal lives. Good or bad, but always interesting. And also as creative artists and the fictional characters they create.
Oh, One-Eye, but thou dost know, O Damon dear, this realm dismantled was, of Jove himself, and now reigns here, a very, very pageok.
You might have rhymed.
Oh, good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for £1,000. Didst perceive?
Very well, my lord.
Upon the talk of poisoning?
I did very well note him.
Then in come Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and you see Hamlet's got his experiment successful. He knows now the king's done it and goes off into wild, exultant talk about it when really what ought he to be thinking of?
Well, planning to kill the king.
Yes, because the king's now warned and time will be short in which he can do it.
There are out-of-school tutorials, too, called private business. These can be anything from Mozart on a gramophone to political arguments or reading from Shakespeare. One thing's obvious. Tutors at Eton are by no means idle. Eton looks more like a university town than a town with a school in it. The houses are scattered all over the place like colleges at Cambridge, and the boys spend a good deal of time in the street. This probably puts a fine edge on the Etonians' famous air of self-possession. Eton is full of tourists. Coach loads of them moving on from Windsor Castle up the Thames make a stop at Eton to photograph the boys in their quaint clothes. You grow an extra skin if you have to be at chimpanzee's tea party. The town has a population of about 2,000, and practically every one of them is in business with the school. Most of the shops are there because the school is, and many of them have been serving Etonians for generations. Besides the predictable sports shops, there are antique shops and a jeweller's for birthday presents, several sophisticated tailors, though school clothes are off the peg nowadays, and of course the shop that first springs to mind at school. At Eton it's called the sock shop. It gives some idea of the value of the Eton trade that when recently a free period before lunch was made a working period, the sock shop lost £100 a week.
Can I take a wine gun? George, 2 packets of tea.
As there's no natural focal point at Eton, it has had to be created. And at 5 minutes past 11 every morning, the school staff meets the headmaster in chambers. Staff common rooms don't exist at Eton, and this is the only opportunity the staff has to get together and discuss matters of common concern. There are 112 Eton masters, or beaks as they're called, and up to the last war, the charge against Eton was that it was too inbred. A very high proportion of its masters were old Etonians. It's a good indication of how far Eton has stirred from its Narcissus-like trance that now only 25 out of 112 went to Eton, and that for the first time in centuries, the headmaster himself was not there. At Eton, a housemaster is almost as independent as the president of a university college. But in 3 vital matters, the headmaster is paramount. He appoints the housemasters, he settles the curriculum, and he is the magistrate.
Been in trouble. I found him in sixth school on Monday in my house when he should have been in school. Nigel's his modern tutor.
What's he like normally? Has he been in the bill before? Rather, he hasn't been. He hasn't been in the bill. He's a very good boy, working very well, and I think completely lenient.
In his capacity as magistrate, the headmaster may receive at chambers 4 or 5 complaints against boys. The masters who make the complaints will consult with him, and the names of the offenders will go down on a list which is called the bill. The beaks leave chambers to become immersed in a sort of general scrimmage. This is the only chance in the day for a boy to be sure of meeting a master he wants to speak to. Indeed, anybody who has any business with authority is here outside chambers in the mid-morning break. This is, in fact, the only general point of convergence in Eton. Conveniently near this point of focus is the school office, where all the business of internal communication and administration is carried on by the school clerk.
Yes. Right.
Those are the people for the bill. See you at 12:15.
Right,
Thank you.
You'd better do the ones that are a bit further away.
Because of your leg.
That's my leg.
Okay. Well, basically, then I'll do the James, Queen's, Boyle,
and music schools. And you better do
I'll
that
do
one
in
in
his
your
own
own
room. Okay.
I'll do the other ones, Allington and...
Okay, fine.
These two sixth formers, one an Oppidan and one a Colleger, act as the headmaster's representatives for 1 week. They're called preposters. During their week of duty, they do no school work. What they're concerned with now is the bill, the list of boys who are summoned to see the headmaster. The preposters are very much aware that they're the chief magistrate's representatives. No knocking on doors.
This Roach in this division, sir. He should see the headmaster at 12:15.
So at 12:15 every day, a row of boys waits on the headmaster's staircase. The bill is not necessarily a list of offenders. It also contains the names of boys whom the headmaster may wish to commend or congratulate.
Now, Rose, you're complained of for missing the last school yesterday, the last school in the afternoon. Why weren't you in it?
Well, sir, I was having a reading school in my room, sir. I thought I was meant to because the master, Mr. Pilkington, said he would be away then.
But he wasn't away, was he? He was taking school.
Yes, he was.
So did you read the notice board in your house?
Yes, sir, but I thought, as Mr. Pilkington would be away then, sir, I thought we would stay in our rooms. But I got the wrong divisions.
How do you mean you got the wrong division?
Well, it was the morning one, sir.
You thought Mr. Pilkington was taking that division. In fact, he was taking the morning one.
Yes.
Yes, I see. You're quite sure that you didn't miss it intentionally?
Yes.
Did you miss it entirely by accident?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Well, I think all the same, you know, that you really must, you're quite old enough now to know which master is supposed to be taking you at which time, in which school, and you oughtn't to confuse your divisions now. Well, I think under the circumstances, as you haven't been in the bill before, I'll just simply ask you to do the same amount of work, 45 minutes work, to do on the next half-holiday afternoon. That's tomorrow, all right?
Yes.
And he'll say...
In so large a school as Eton, the bill may be the only chance in his career that a boy gets to speak to the headmaster. The headmaster himself is concerned with advance along the whole educational front. A housemaster's command is almost an independent one, but he could not, for example, exempt his boys from early school. What the boys learn, and in what proportion of their time, is the headmaster's affair. And it's in this role that the headmaster leads the school forward. What confronts the present headmaster is the need to compete for university places, and the fact that the average Eton boy will need to earn his living. Can he tilt the balance in favor of the average boy's career without resorting to un-Etonian compulsions? The last division of the morning, once a voluntary work period, is now a compulsory one. The sock shop mob has vanished from the street, and until lunchtime, boys who are not doing classes must be in their houses working. The boys' own rooms are fundamental to the Eton scheme of education. From the moment you enter the school, you have your own room to live in and to work in your own time. This is Eton's chief excellence. It takes the curse off the public school system. A boy with a room of his own is on his own. He is neither sustained nor intimidated by communal pressures, as are boys in other public schools who are always part of a crowd. This is why there's no such thing as an Eton type. If you can spot an Etonian, it's because he's so much his own man, even down to the decoration of his room. But even if you're in your room at the appropriate time, it doesn't always mean you're working. If a fag is pushed for time, he'll take it out of working hours. Though fags are called upon to do their fag master's chores, they're relieved of a good many of their own. There are maids to make their beds and tidy up their rooms. These maids and the whole domestic economy in a house are in the charge of what at Eton is called a dame.
What stores do you want?
Yes, I'd like a mophead. Yes. And dishcloth. Yes. Toilet rolls. Toilet
Polish.
soap. Toilet soap. Mm-hmm. Polish. Mm-hmm.
And then what, is anything broken anywhere?
And you, well,
The washing in the library, yes, I've got that.
The hinge on the cupboard door.
Yes. Oh, yes, that piece of the cupboard.
Yes.
By the way, have they been to see...
The positions of both dame and housemaster have evolved from the lodging housekeepers of the old days. And the housemaster, known as the tutor, has an almost independent command. His boys are his in a very special sense, because he chooses them himself. A housemaster normally keeps his house for 16 years. Some 13 years before he gets it, the headmaster will tell him that he may begin to make his list. That is, a list of the boys he will accept in his house when he gets it. Whether your newborn son goes to Eton or not depends on persuading a master who is making up his list to take him. Houses vary very greatly, depending on the housemaster. If he's fond of rowing, for instance, the boys will be influenced to row. More important are his values, and these can range between a strict puritanism and a spirit of laissez-faire. It's the luck of the draw. To assist him in the administration of his house, the housemaster appoints a house captain, and together they select a committee of senior boys. These are known as his library. They sit with him at meals, and they're responsible for all matters of petty discipline and organization, and in consultation with him, the punishment of offenders in these minor categories. It costs £17 a week to keep your boy at Eton. The demand for places is enormous, and probably because their parents are more aware of this, 60% of the boys are old Etonian sons. They're entered at birth, even at conception, though this practice is strictly forbidden.
Oh, very dismal. Get inside. Mr. Benham.
Yes, sir.
How many for this house, Peter?
There's a very intricate system of order cards and tickets and markings, all in the nature of reports on the boy's progress or conduct. These can be made by any beak, and they all have to be shown by the boy to his house tutor. The house tutor's room, therefore, is a sort of clearinghouse for information about his boys. He can never be unaware of their problems. This showing up goes on every day immediately after boys' dinners.
Francis.
This is my nominee application form.
Late as usual. Thank you.
You don't seem to be making very much of a success of your French.
I think that's an improvement on last half, sir.
You do?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't seem to think very highly of your prepared work.
Well, no, it's only the essays, sir, the out of school work, sir.
Yes, but do you think perhaps you're giving enough time for these essays?
Well, I think so, yes, sir.
When do you do them?
Well, after 9 sometimes, sir.
Well, I think probably you ought to devote a little bit more time, and then you might be more successful.
Yes, sir.
Right. Right, that must have been rather kind to you, really.
Yes.
Right, last, I want you to go down to Ren's, get half a dozen eggs, 2 tins of peaches, and a pound of sugar, please.
Yes.
Right, thank you. Okay, here you go.
Only the library have the privilege of shouting for a boy, and any fag who hears the call must answer it. The last man there gets the job.
You others go away. Fawn. Fawn, can you go round to Captain Bates, Mr. Coleridge's, and ask him if he wants Heaven Scott and Harvey to do raft duty, and if so, when?
Boys at Eton can expect to spend their first year as fags. They make tea, act as waiters, tidy libraries, clean shoes, and generally run, fetch, and carry. The fags are the lowest layer in a society where rank and duty and privilege are strictly defined. The top layer consists of the captain of the house and the half-dozen members of library. The housemaster stands by at the top of this social structure as a consultant. The ultimate sanctions of this society are, of course, punishments of one sort or another. Members of library can give lines, and the captain of the house can beat boys, but nowadays only by permission of his housemaster. It used to be thought that order in a school finally depended on the cane, but the two most influential boys at Eton have abolished corporal punishment within the sphere of their jurisdiction. What kind of life you have at Eton depends very largely on the kind of boys you have at the top of your house, and these change. Under an enlightened captain of the house, life can be very pleasant. But with an unenlightened boy and a bad housemaster, it could be a misery.
I want a Mars bar.
He wants it, but I don't know how to get it.
And
How much commission are you talking? One mouse bar. Never got my orange bed. College wanted! Hang on a minute.
Hurry up, College, please.
Are you
Quiet, please, College. Just 1 or 2 points of the kind which do occur this time of the half. Running down Sixth Form Passage is bad again. As you know very well, the floorboards which you run down the Sixth Form Passage go straight through the Mastering College. And so every time anybody runs down outside there, he knows all about it. It's quite intolerable. And it's even worse for his housekeeper living underneath it. So there won't be any running down Sixth Form Passage. And Sixth Form and Liberty will give 50 lines on the spot to anybody they catch doing this. Another point, a rather more seasonal point bound up with the fine weather. You mustn't hang your bathing trunks out of your window for any purpose, especially to dry. The reason for this is that it's bad for the tourists. Now, Calvin, I think you have...
Yes, we thought somebody deserved his cap.
Thank you, College.
3 afternoons in a week are half holidays, and at Eton, games are regarded as a very important part of education. If you're keen, the opportunities are all there, and if you're not, you don't have to pretend to be. In the summer half, you have to declare yourself a wet bob or a dry bob, and you'll be expected to spend some time in whichever sphere you choose. Eton has its own 2 incomprehensible games of football, the field game and the famous wall game. And though they do play rugby football and association in the Easter half, it's rather an amateurish sort of enterprise in the time left over from the Eton games. Of their comprehensible activities, cricket and rowing are what they do best.
In ball. 2, 3, throw.
The captain of games is only less of a god than the captain of a house, and much more of one for some people. It's in the summer half that he and his friends come into their glory, and there's a lot of glory, but they earn it handsomely. The whole burden of the school's athletic future is on their shoulders.
3, you are the powerhouse of the race. You've got to behave as if you are. More effort the whole time. Every stroke has got to count. Hard.
Up to your chest, too. And free. Come on now. Punch! Punch, all of you. Punch at the beginning of the stroke. Pull it right up into your chest. Your hands away. Get down to your sax board. And then pull it right through. Hard, really hard. Well done. That's good. Fox, next stroke. Give her 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Are you ready? Hard! Come on! All together!
1, 2,
5 days jerky, sit back at the finish. Now your stomach. Going crazy in the head.
The Combined Cadet Corps, a training for all three services, is far from being the compulsory chore that most schools make it. At Eton, it's difficult to get into. 20% of all Etonians make a career in the services, much more than the public school average. The Corps is taken very seriously, and there are 3 long exercises every half. Golden afternoons are a great theme of books about Eton. In fact, the Eton afternoons are pretty strenuous for most boys, and by tea time they're relaxed and expansive. And the real occasion of the day is tea. Eton's great gift to its boys is privacy, the freedom to choose their own associates. Friendships made at school are often deep and last for life. That's why the Eton Old Boy Network is so formidable. Library has its fags in attendance, but the great merit of the Eton system of private rooms is that junior boys are not left out. Tea is a social occasion for them, too. Messing together in 3s and 4s is an old established school custom. This tea is a very ordinary one of cornflakes and bread and butter and jam, but the occasion is no less expansive, and the conversation has the Eton quality of self-possession.
Lines is a very effective punishment for most things, but I think that perhaps one ought to have corporal punishment as a, when there's something very rather more serious. Something, anyone who takes advantage of the system whereby corporal punishment isn't inflicted. If you think of another better punishment, a really serious.
Okay, maybe it isn't better, but it's just wrong to inflict pain. It doesn't do any good.
No, it doesn't. 5 minutes in a row.
Generally, the point of the punishment is to stop the chap doing it next time.
Exactly.
Well, and I would far rather.
Depends on. You must admit that it depends.
I mean, I'd far rather do lines than being beaten, because beaten beating me would...
Although the conversation has been mainly about beating, it has not occurred to anyone to challenge the senior boys' right to this barbarous privilege. Few question their authority.
I sometimes wonder whether the burden of demands made on a senior boy isn't almost intolerable. I think it's wonderful how they stand up to it. But the answer to your question, I think, is this. That one of the lessons most worth teaching to a young man is that the greater your power and privilege in life, the greater your obligations and the less your freedoms. Many people I know in positions of power and privilege haven't remembered this. We can all think of some. But in fact, this is the one worthwhile thing learning if you're going to be a big man ever. And you cannot teach this to a child, or to a boy, shall I say, to a young man, without giving them the authority and then trying to teach him the lesson.
Well, what about the and strawberry?
The president of Pop. One talented old Etonian has declared that the effort of getting into Pop deprived him of all further ambition in this world. Pop is the Eton Society and one of the peaks of the Eton social structure. There are always exactly 20 boys in Pop, and the society elects its own members. Pop has taken on the maintenance of school discipline. As Eton is a collection of houses, it lacks any overall system of boys' authority at school level. Pop has filled the gap, and in return is privileged to wear buttonholes, sponge-bag trousers, braided coats and fancy waistcoats, some of them with flowered silk. It is the summit of ambition.
The great thing is the corps must find their own substitutes. The other thing is these jerseys, which are not being V-necked now. In fact, they're not being V-necked at all. Try and sort of find people for a bit over that.
This is in change.
This is in change, yeah.
What is the rule about sunglasses?
Sunglasses are only allowed to be worn by coxes on the river.
One of the charges levelled against Etonians is that they're arrogant. An example quoted against them is that in important inter-school cricket matches, it's quite likely that almost nobody will turn out to watch. In fact, it doesn't occur to an Etonian that there's any other reason for watching a match than the fact that it interests him. He has so many other things to do. A very old established sport at Eton is beagling.
Come on then. Come on, wagon up, wagon up. Come on. Come on. Come on then. Yeah, fans. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Adrian, where's the box spanner?
It isn't behind my right ear. Elmer's with it.
In the engineering workshops, you can build a car or mend a motorcycle, or you may prefer simply to turn out thousands of bottle tops for a local factory. The money comes back into the funds of the engineering workshop. There's no end to the pursuits and enthusiasms of Eton boys, and no less than 60 societies exist to further their out-of-school interests. They range from the Aeronautical Society to the Viking Club, and take in on the way madrigals and magic, ornithology and stamp collecting, film-making and politics. Of all the outside influences on Eton, Merseyside is probably the strongest. All young men are alienated from their fathers nowadays. At Eton, the gap must be at its widest. Social service is organised. Boys help in boys' clubs or wash dishes in hospitals or tend gardens for old people. When boys criticise these activities, and they do, it's from a Merseyside angle. It's a bogus relationship, they say, like the squire's wife taking soup to the poor.
I think that there's been an enormous change. I think in the last few years, actually. I think it's probably something to do with the attempts of advertisers and other people to represent the sort of teenagers as a sort of separate, different world.
But I think that one of the results of it is that it does make boys of the same age regard themselves as a group. And I think that the strength of the feeling of belonging to this group of young people with the same sort of interests and that kind of thing has done much to break down the old feeling of sort of social division.
Senior boys can enjoy their pint in their own club. It's called Tap. They don't sell anything stronger than beer, and there's always such a crush in there and so few people serving that the drinks circulate rather slowly, perhaps by design. The idea behind Tap is that boys will certainly sneak off to drink somewhere. They might as well do it here. Perhaps the consciousness of sophistication as drinkers inspires a sophisticated line of talk.
I think the trouble about it is nobody believes in anything.
You can't believe in anything, for one thing.
You can't make them believe in what you believe in.
Most people are literally well things that you don't
I'm not saying I should believe in one particular thing. The thing is, I don't believe in anything. They're very English in that.
And now at 9 o'clock of a summer evening, it's nearing the end of the Eton day. Lock-up was at 8. A great number of boys will have leave to pursue their interests in their various societies. The others will be working in their rooms. The housemaster is on his rounds.
Good evening, Eddie. Did you get to this play last night at Queen's Age?
Yes, I did, sir.
What's it like?
It's very good indeed. It's a nice enjoyable evening. You go up on the boat and they give you a very good meal when you get there. And it's very good playing for bargains. So
it is?
Yes, it's very good. So yes.
Time has had a strange revenge on Eton. It began as a pious charity for poor scholars, and it's become the great social fetish of the English people. Its huge reputation as a status factory quite overshadows its real virtues as a school. And this is a pity because it has a claim to be the best school in the world. Eton's example could still save us from the consequences of the 11+ examination and the threat of a meritocracy. Here is a school which really believes that the non-intellectual boy's education is as important as anybody else's, and which has a built-in bias in favor of individuality and even nonconformity. The marchers on the 4th of June wanted to abolish Eton, but this is to argue that Rolls-Royces should never have been made. But there is another answer: Rolls-Royces all round. To send a boy to Eton costs only 7 6 a week, more than to keep a juvenile delinquent at an approved school. More education on the Eton model might help, available to everybody and free from the curse of status, the upper crust and all that.
The whole of the Eton education and the slant of it is one which discourages parochialism and encourages a fairly wide concept of society as a whole, and therefore I think the boy finds it easy to consider himself belonging to this large, curious, in some way disintegrated, in some way highly integrated society of 1,200 young people. The other is something which I can only answer really by saying I'm frightfully sorry, but I mean, even this hit me when I came as a very new headmaster 5 terms ago. Eton is Eton, and there's nothing more to be said.